Tova Friedman.
I call myself Tova.
We're here to give you the opportunity to tell your story, your experience of when you were a little girl and the world went mad. And I understand from your photographs and from what we talked about earlier, you were a very little girl when all of this started to happen. So I'm giving you the platform to tell your story, to archive it for generations so that your experience and others' experiences will never be forgotten or put away, so that everybody can understand the madness. So I'll give you the floor.
Okay, thank you. I was born in 1938, September 7th. It's a very significant time because Poland was invaded in 1939. So I was 1 year old, and we lived in Danzig, or Gdynia, which is the Polish side of Danzig. Danzig was a port. It still is. At that time, it was a free city. It had a lot of boats coming in, and it was a very serious, important port. Therefore, it was bombed the first day of the war. Now, it's so significant that I was born in that time, exactly September, because we weren't home when our house was bombed. My mother, my father, and myself went to celebrate my first birthday, because it was September, with my grandparents. So we went, we weren't there, and the uncle who stayed in our house died. He was one of the first victims, because the house was destroyed, and we never came back to that part of to the section of our lives. We went. So we, this is from my father, because I was too young to know. We arrived to my grandparents in Tomaszów Mazowiecki. It's a small town. Well, at that time, I had about 35,000 people, 50% Jewish. And my father told me that when we arrived, his parents and my mother's parents no longer lived in their homes, but they were in a ghetto. So we moved in with them to celebrate my first birthday in a ghetto. Now, the reason that my father didn't live in the shtetl, in the small town, and he went to Danzig, was because it was no opportunities. They were invited, and they were promised land, they were promised business, they were promised everything. So my father and mother thought, great, it's a wonderful chance to start a new life with a new baby, a new marriage. They were only married 2 years. It turned out that it was absolute disaster, and he had to go home, and he had to go home to his parents because he didn't want to be without them when the bombing started. My memory starts at the age of 4. I remember living in a tiny apartment, always under the table, because there was just no room for little children. There was no room for anybody. There were about 50 people in a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, 1 bathroom. So I remember my parents would feed me under the table, and I would play under the table. In fact, I would live under the table. There was just no other space. That's when I was there till I was about, I would say about 4.5, 5. And here is my memory, because my memory became sharper. The first thing I remember is the death of my mother's parents. I heard rumors. Now, what's interesting about all of this, my parents, throughout the entire war, believed that I should know the truth. Never hid anything from me. I overheard conversations. I knew what was going on. because my mother had the philosophy of child rearing, that if a child hears secrets, they'll imagine worse than it is. So she felt to expose me to everything, and it was fine. So I remember when they took my grandparents who were living with us and just shut them right downstairs. And I didn't see the shooting, but I knew when they took them down. And then my mother said, they're gone. You will not have any more grandparents. A few weeks later, my father comes in from the outside, and he says this to my mother. And I was sitting listening. He says to her, do you remember the graves that we dug a few days ago? My mother said yes, because they used people like my mother and my father. They were like in their, I think, late 20s. They were strong to dig the graves for their parents. My father said, I took them and I put them on a truck. I helped them up. As he's talking, he's crying, and I'm sitting right next listening to it. And my mother said, we know where they're going. My father said, yes, we didn't talk about it. He said, we didn't say anything. We kissed each other, we said goodbye, and the wagons just moved. He knew that he would never see his parents, because what they did, they began to clear the area of all elderly. They were useless, they were pointless, they were a drag. Children came later. First the elderly, at least in our ghetto, in our town. And a few days later, my father comes back again. He was the outside person. You see, information was very hard to get. No radio, no newspapers. The town was hermetically sealed. You had no idea what the other ghetto was like. My mother's big family was in the Lodger ghetto, which is a half hour away by car. I went to visit there, a half hour. Yet it could have been a different world. She never heard from them. So when my father came back with any kind of news, and what was his news? He said, you know, he looked at me and he said, your Uncle James is not going to be here anymore with you. He was a lawyer. He loved me, and I loved him. From the age of 3 and 4, I used to sit on his lap. They had killed all the lawyers. So I've been listening to all of that as a little child, and I said to myself, first of all, you have to understand, I thought that, well, maybe that's the way it's everywhere. Maybe that's what it is. I never knew how life was before the war. I didn't have before the war. I didn't have anything. So this was, well, elderly have to die because they're no good. My uncle would never show up anymore. Uncle James, he was gone. My other grandparents were gone. We were I went back to visit. This is why I know, because at that time I was too young to picture the whole situation. We lived in 6 buildings inside the Polish community. The Polish community would go in and out. They would look at us. There were 6 buildings with a courtyard inside the buildings. And we were surrounded by what I call a human fence. There were people there, they were hired. Some of them were hired, and they were surrounding us with guns. And we couldn't get in and out of the ghetto, except some people. My father would once in a while go out. He had some working papers. You had to have papers, constant papers. And children and parents and women, we didn't have anything. And I do remember that we'd wake up in the morning and there were less people there. They were constantly shoving people from place to place, moving them in the middle of the night. We didn't know where. You see, Hitler, this whole war was orchestrated by very smart people. That is what is so scary about it. And this is why I'm so important that I say this to the world. Education without morality is completely worthless. These people were psychologists, they were therapists, they were MDs, they were doctors, they were big lawyers, they were scientists, they were engineers. These people on top were excellent thinkers. How do we know that? Because they knew what would break us. Terror. How do you bring terror to a people? You keep all knowledge away from them, so that when they woke up in the morning, and we did, there were 6 buildings. One building was completely empty. We didn't know where they went, and we didn't hear it because it was the middle of the night, and they came with gunpoint. And if anybody made the tiniest noise, he knew there would be consequences. So they would get them out into some truck somewhere. And we huddled in whatever situation we were, trying not even to hear. I know, I never heard anything. I woke up in the morning and I said, oh, this one isn't here. What happened to this person? Because I could go from building to building. We were inside. I could go from apartment to apartment. That was free to do that. And my mother would say in Yiddish, they took them. And everybody said, where? We don't know. This psychology of terror is the way you destroy a people. How do you destroy an entire nation? You take away the elderly, the grandparents. You take away that which makes a family stable, right? I mean, I know I'm a grandmother. And I know what I mean to my grandchildren. And I know what it would be if all of a sudden I would be gone out of their lives. So, well, that's what they did. They took all our elderly grandparents and made them disappear, killed them. We knew what happened. And then they took the intellectual people, the rabbis. We didn't have a rabbi to talk to. We had no doctors, because a non-Jewish doctor would not come to our place. So people were dying from simple pneumonia, colds, because they killed all the Jewish doctors. So when people come and tell me, why did you go, to the ovens like sheep? I'd like to know how those people who say these things would behave if the whole structure of the society would be destroyed right in front of them. There were no teachers. I didn't go to school till I was 12. Almost. I tried school a little bit earlier, but I couldn't concentrate. I didn't even know what school was. I didn't even know that people sit and learn, and there are books and there is music. None of this. We were sort of growing up under fear, silence. I knew when I shouldn't talk, and I didn't talk. I knew any noise would jeopardize us. So this was the ghetto, and this was good. You know what this was good? Because my mother and father were together. We were a family. We lived with about 10 other families, but it didn't matter. We lived, we had structure still. My mother talked to me. My father came from wherever he came. And then one day they said to us, we have to go inside this ghetto. Was like some empty warehouses. You see, I have a vague memory of this. But I remember that I had to go there with my mother, and there were clothing all over the tables. And women and children would sort of try to put the clothing in certain way they wanted us. Shoes on one place, clothing, pants here, old, clothing for little children. We sort of organized it. Only later on, I think my mother knew, but I didn't know, these were the clothing from the people that they transported somewhere or shot them. Some of the clothing were from our grandparents. What did they do with the grandparents? They would shoot them, standing right by their open graves. People were standing. Some of them were shot before, like my grandparents, but standing. And when they fell into the graves, many of them were naked, they would burn everything because ashes takes very little place, you know that, compared to, they didn't have to, so they could just cover it up. And I lived with all of this at the age of 4.5. And I would stand next to my mother and I would put a little shoe here and I would look at it, and I remember the feeling of wanting a piece of clothing, but I knew that this was from somebody that died. Instinctively I knew, I can't touch that. I can't possibly benefit by this. I knew this as a little girl. There were many other chances that I could have taken something from somebody. I had an instinct, you know, at 4.5, 5, that this is almost like holy clothing. Now, where were they going? They were going to Germany, probably. I don't know what they were doing with all that's clothing. And the German nutritionist, probably with PhDs, knew exactly how much food to give us, so we will die at their rate. Do you know, they would prevent us from suicide. They took away anything that's a possibility of suicide all throughout the war because they wanted you to die the way they wanted to. So there was less and less food. Less and less and less food. Because we heard rumors that they were moving us around. That's another thing. You break up the family, then you break up all relationships, brothers, sisters. That's before the concentration camp and the extermination camp. That is a preparation for that. You know why they had to do that? Because they knew they didn't have enough room to do it all in the concentration camp or all in the extermination camp. They had numbers, they had charts. Let's say my town had 15,000 Jews, which it probably did at that time, all in ghettos. So they had to export us to other places. But the trucks were only a certain size. Do you see the logistics, how they worked in Berlin with numbers? It would be I think, we have a room, and the trains were coming for us, the trains. There was so much space in each train. Well, 500 people have to die before they get on the train because there isn't room for those 500 people, or the trucks. So what happened? They began to give us less and less food so that a certain amount of people would die at a certain rate. And this is what began happening in that ghetto. And I remember thinking, wow, I'm very, very hungry. I wasn't hungry when I first, when I was 3 or 4. At the age of 5, I began to get hungry. That means I was there for a while. They were getting rid of the ghetto. They were moving us somewhere else. One of the philosophies was move them, separate them, move them here, separate families, separate sisters. My mother was separated from 9 brothers and sisters. She never saw them after she left. When she first came back with my grandparents, they were still there. And then they disappeared. Never heard from them again. 150 family members were murdered. Women, children, brothers and sisters. The same thing with my father. My father had 9 brothers and sisters. 3 survived at the end of the war, and then 1 was killed. I'll tell you the story after the war. So the philosophy of terror, secrecy, move them around every place. They were breaking our spirit. And whoever couldn't survive on that piece of bread or that rations that they gave us would just die. Survival of the fittest. We made it. Other people, we get up in the morning, there were these dead. Not only with some of the you know, some of the buildings empty because they were taken somewhere, but then there were all these dead. So from 6 buildings, 4 stories high, full of people, close to 15,000 people were stuck in these buildings. Then there were only 4 left, 4 buildings left. Where were the other people going? And the rumors made us wonder. You know, my mother would say, I have a sister with 6 children. I wonder where she is. She's in Lodz. And she'd say, how can we know what's happening in Lodz? No way, no way. Nobody could get out of that place to find out what's happening in Lodz. So she never, ever, ever knew. She died in America in 1957 at the age of 45, being the only person left from her entire family, not even knowing. Had she lived longer, like now, there are archives, we can check how they died. They kept excruciating, perfect records. I could tell. She would, but at that time there was nothing. So she died, just died, not knowing anything. So, here we are back at the ghetto. Less and less people. My father, right after the war, 1945, 46, had to write about what he remembers when the ghetto was liquidated. I remember some things. That's what I remember. I remember there were not many people left. They, at gunpoint, took us outside and they put us around the church. The church had a white steeple, a white church. Why the church? Around the church there was like a lot of space, a lot of space. And they must have gotten an order. See, now looking back, I read about how they functioned, because I couldn't understand how they did it. You know, I couldn't read anything till I was about 50. I couldn't even read stories of other people. It was so difficult. And they must have gotten an orders, get rid of people, we have no space. So they got us all outside and they began to shoot those who didn't die from starvation, those who weren't transported to other places, which we don't know where they went to, those that were left, with thousands left, because the trains were coming, the cattle cars were coming, trucks were coming. They had to move. And one of the things that I would say was the German motto, leave no witnesses. They covered their traces, they covered their traces. So I'm sitting outside with my mother. My father disappears. He was the outside man. He had to tell us what was going on. And that's when he went and he looked and he saw. And he saw people going together. He gives their names. His barber with his family, holding the family, walking towards the trains. His next door neighbor, the doctors were gone a long time ago. They shot all the doctors a long time. But people he was a Zionist. So they had groups, Zionist groups in the town. My family was 200 years in that town. 200 years. We were like rooted. We were Polish. I spoke Polish. Do you know, I only started speaking not Polish after the war. My mother said no more Polish. But we felt like we were part of the citizens. We were for generations. So there were all kinds of groups. There were entertainment groups. My father was a singer. He watched all those his friends walking together to the trains. And I could see it from his writing that he must have been crying the whole time that he was writing this. Those that were left, as I told you, were put down on outside, and the shooting began. They had probably an order, shoot 1,000, shoot 2,000. Since we weren't human, we were numbers, so it didn't matter, right? I'm sitting on my mother's lap. She is holding me with her body like that. Why was I not shot? Why was this? We don't know. I never understood how I made it, because if I believed in real miracles, I would say these are miracles. The first time I'm not there when the bombs fell in our building. The second time, I survived a serious massacre. A serious massacre. See, our building wasn't taken, so it's not like the other buildings were taken, but this time everybody was taken. There were 2 buildings left with people. Thousands, because we were stuffed like mice, into every apartment. Instead of 20 people, there were maybe 60, 70 people in an apartment. I don't even know how we slept, because I was under the table. So the shooting, and it went on, and all I can remember was my mother holding me like this with all her body. I was about 4.5, to figure out the exact. And then there was quiet. They had gotten the number that they wanted. They shot and began counting the numbers. When they shot all the people that they needed, they told the rest of us. My father came and he told us. He told my mother. I only heard what he said, and then she told me. She was such a woman that I think because of her, I'm sort of normal. Because there was never a surprise. In my entire experience, I wasn't shocked, because as long as she was with me, she prepared me what's going to happen. Like you take a child to a doctor now, and they get an injection, and you tell the child it's going to hurt, but it's not going to hurt long. But if you tell the child it's not going to hurt at all, then you're lying. And why should the child trust you? Well, she said to me everything. She said to me these words: they stopped shooting. They will not shoot anymore. And I believed it. And I saw the SS. I saw them everywhere. In fact, I thought that this is the uniform of all men, that all non-Jewish men on earth have these boots and these riding pants. I didn't know that. I don't even know why they wore those pants. They had these pants like that, and tall black boots, very shiny, very clean. And I thought to myself, okay, my mom said that they stopped. We can get up. We got up. We looked around. Blood everywhere. Dead everywhere. Now, as a child, I didn't know many of the dead people. I knew kids. I recognized some kids, but I didn't know the adults. Because, you have a certain kind of my adults were only my family members. They weren't. And the cleaning up began. I remember the cleaning up. They began to, those that survived, they were put on trucks. Let's say they had room for 500 people on the trucks. The train was full with some other people. They had numbers. They had planned out they looked at the survivors. And then my mother said, I guess they wouldn't let us go back into the buildings. My mother said, we can't go back to the building. I guess they're going to shoot us a different way. They're going to kill us a different way. We have to wait to see. She said this to me. And I said, I wonder what? They left the dead lying, full of blood everywhere. The survivors were put on trucks and went somewhere. And there was silence. I was thinking of the things that I had left in my little room. I couldn't get it. Because I want to tell you an interesting story. About a year earlier, I must have been 4, when a German walked into our room and I had a possession. I had a coat. I remember that as today, a little white coat, little fur white coat. I don't know how my parents got it for me. And the German, big guy, went into the closet and took it. I'm 4, and I'm looking at him. And I say to myself, no, you're not. You're not taking this from me. And I ran and tried to bite his boot. And he kicked me. My mother couldn't, she was shocked, you know. He kicked me across the room. He didn't kill me, you could have. And he walked away with my only possession to this day. When I look at the little fur coat, I remember that incident. So that I had things in a room, I couldn't go back. My mother said, we're not going back there anymore. We're staying out. We're going to be outside for a while. My father comes, my father always hears things. He saved us by knowledge, by information. Information is very important in a place like this. And he said like this to us, all these people are leaving, but we're not. There are 23 of us, he said. I didn't know what 23 was, you know, but later on I knew what the number was. I couldn't read or write or count or anything. We're going to bury the dead. And then the burying of the dead began. The Germans were there, not that many anymore, because there were very few people, just us. I was the only child. And my father began to dig. They didn't have at that time, at that moment, for some reason, they didn't put whatever they were in mass graves. We just put them anywhere, in some section. I think you could still go there if you go to the town. They aren't marked, of course. And I began to pick up the dead, following my mother. Put a hand, a foot, a head, a body. And what was amazing to me, that my father said Kaddish. I didn't know what Kaddish was. It's a prayer for the dead that praises God. As an adult, I must say, I can't believe that anybody could praise God. But he did. Everything was clean. Then we went inside the buildings. I don't know how long. See, I don't know. It was weeks. I don't remember where we slept. We must have been sleeping in one of those buildings. I don't think we ever got back to our room, because there were all kinds of empty rooms, 6 empty buildings. And we began to straighten everything up as if nothing happened, which is interesting. For some reason, whoever, you know, the powers that be, the German powers in Berlin, had a feeling that sometimes somebody's going to say to them, what did you do? And they will say nothing. Show me. There is no blood, there is no bodies, there isn't anything. So every time we left the place, it was clean. No sign of anything, no murder, no sign of anything. I don't know how long it took. It took quite a while. It was cleaning up the crew. That was done, completely done. My mother always said, oh, they're going to kill us now. They're finished with us. My father disappeared and came back, and he said, no. They're taking us to another camp. And that's how we left the ghetto. 1943. I was 5. Got on the truck, came, I don't know how long the trip was, maybe an hour and a half, came to the next place. The next place was called Starvation. That was a labor camp. This was a ghetto, the labor camp. The labor camp didn't have people surrounding us, but it had 4 towers with SS, you know, watching us from the towers. And barbed wires, but they were not electrified. They were like, you know, high, 6, 7, 8 feet, like a prison barbed wires. They had little huts, little buildings. Apparently, it was some kind of an army camp from World War I. They used every structure that they didn't have to build because the purpose was to, again, to funnel us into the next place. But the ovens weren't ready. And people were coming from all over the world. Well, not the world, all over Europe. What I'm saying is the thought, the logistics, could have been the best general in the world figuring this out, to how to move millions of people to the deaths. So here is the labor camp, and the situation was much more severe, much more. First of all, we lived in this little room with a lot of people again, and there were these I call them shells, you know, these triple deckers. We had the top decker, 3 families, but we're still with families. We still were not separated, but each family had a shelf. And my parents disappeared every day at I don't know what time, when it became a little dawn outside, and they went to work about a half hour away. By the way, when I went back to Poland, I went to look for that factory where they went to. I had to see it. And it's still owned now by private German firms. Can you imagine my walking in there and hearing German spoken in this gigantic factory? It's about 10 times the size of this room. And there are pictures all over of people who work there. 95% died in that factory because they were using some kind of a yellow powder. If you inhaled it, it killed your lungs. It was some kind of gunpowder. It was something. I don't know what it was. They called this factory Yellow Death. They came home every day at all dark. Must have been 10, 11 at night. Every single day. The children were we were on our own. We were watched by the Gestapo with guns. I knew what the guns, I knew what would happen if I didn't behave. And I wasn't sure what it means to behave. My parents were gone. All adults were gone. So my mother said to me, listen, let me tell you what you have to do since I'm not here. This is how you have to behave. And every morning she practiced with me. She woke me up at 5 in the morning. She said, come, let me show you what to do. And she began to march. You know the noise that shoes make? There were the Nazi wore these specific kind of boots with a bottom that made certain kind of noise. You see, children had to be aware of that kind of noise because we knew which SS, which soldier, which Gestapo man was coming by the way he walked, by the noise he made. Some walked faster, some walked slower, so we knew who was more dangerous than the other. That's how clever we were. We had to do that. So she began to walk like a real tough one. And she said to me, walk towards me. I did. And she said, if this happens to you, what do you do? She said, I'll tell you what you have to do. Walk to the side. He has to have the right of way immediately. No eye contact. Don't look at him. Don't look at his eyes. Look at his belt. I was 5. So I looked, the belt was high enough for me. I look at his belt. Put your hands to the back. And whatever you're wearing on your head, if it's a kerchief or something, take it off. That's what you do. And you're silent when a German happens to come across your path while I'm not here. And she practiced every day. So I became so good at it, it was part of my repertoire. In fact, you know what's interesting that I remember? I used to be proud of myself for learning how to behave the right way. Not only now, but later on also. I thought that these teachings from my mother were what I have to do, and she'll be proud of me. So I was no fear. I knew what to do. And then one day, we heard on the loudspeaker, the camp had loudspeakers, out everybody, out. To the main, it was a center. There was always like a main place where people gather. We will show you what's going to happen to you if you don't obey our orders, if you disrespect us. Apparently a woman, an adult, which I was shocked that she didn't know better. As a child, I was shocked. She was thinking of, I don't know what, face to face with the Gestapo. Didn't give him the right of way, had eye contact with him. He gathered all of us together. My mother took my hand, I remember. She said, remember how I taught you? Watch. And I watched how she was shot in public. What impressed me is not the shooting so much, but her children running to her on her body. She had 3 little children and her husband screaming and crying on her body. And I said to myself, my mother would never do that. You don't make a mistake like that. That's how common, that's how I accepted that situation. You know how to behave because you've got to survive somehow. Oh, that place, the food, the starvation was absolutely there. I began to feel the starvation in ghetto, Tomaszów, but it increased here. And being alone the whole day, what did the kids do? There were lots of kids, motherless, fatherless, just wild, hungry. We would be very violent. They would pick sticks, the big boys, and they would say, I am a Nazi, you are a Jew. And they would hit the Jews. They were all Jews. And I remember being a little girl, the only way I could escape being beaten by the other kids, by older kids, was to hide under our building. It was a hut, and it was a little raised from the ground, maybe that much. I could crawl in there. And sometimes I would stay there until my parents came. I was scared of the kids because the hunger and the violence and the fear from each other, you know, and the SS watching us constantly. And then the rumors again. We are leaving here. They begin again. The same thing started, the same process. It was like they did the same process in every place. It was as if they had written a book, which they did, a book of destruction. Okay, we need to move these people again. We have no room. What are we going to do with them? Start the starvation process. We'll give you a month. I'm making that up because I didn't read their report, but that's, as an adult, that's what must have happened. And they decreased our rations. And there were more and more and more dead. Because they were moving us. They didn't have enough trucks. They didn't have enough trains. Again, the dead. Again, the burying. Again, they were every so often, my father would come and he would say, it looks like tomorrow we won't go to work that early because we have to dig a grave. They used us. They didn't do anything themselves. They used us. So my parents had to dig a grave, a community grave, where I don't know, hundreds of people were in it. Gigantic graves. Out of town. So I said, oh, I wonder who's going now. What's happening now? And people began again to disappear. Less adults, less. And then one day, again, timing is, I don't know how long, we must have been there 6, 7 months, something like that. Because I was already 5.5. Somebody told me, later on in Auschwitz, my age. I didn't know my age. My father comes in, and none of the people are going to work. The trucks aren't there to take them to work. And he says, hide her. Those are the only, I don't know what language. I used to speak Polish. I don't know a single word of Polish. I spoke Polish till I was 10. My mind blocked it all out. It was so horrible. So since we had the upper bed, like the upper shelf, as I call it, I always saw hanging from the ceiling some stuff, maybe a towel. We had nothing. Maybe a towel, maybe a stuff, maybe a sheet. There was stuff there on hooks. Never occurred to me to think about it. Apparently, my father had cut out, there was a double ceiling there, cut out a space just big enough for 2 people to crawl in. And when he said hide her, must have been ready for this. I remember my father took a chair. Look how graphic I remember all this. I was young enough for my mother he picked me up, she climbed on the bed, he handed me, and I didn't say a word, didn't ask. I learned not to talk, not to make a noise, and shoved me in there, and she followed me. And my father must have done something to make it look like nothing was there. And sitting on her lap, and she puts her hand on my mouth so tightly that I had black and blue marks right here for weeks to follow here, so tightly. I wouldn't have made any noise anyhow, but she didn't want to take a chance. And then I hear the boots. I always hear those boots coming in, like this downstairs. And I hear people screaming, heraus, heraus, out, heraus, heraus, heraus. And they began to shooting. Now, they didn't suspect anybody there, obviously, but it was a style, shooting, just maybe scaring. And there were bullets whisked right past me like that, and my mother is holding me. And they got stuck in the it was like what's that old attic, or I don't know what it was there. It was very low. We sat like this. And it was old and decrepit, and there was it wasn't really a window, it was like an opening. I saw all the kids that I played with outside. And the trucks were there. There was the children's selection. To this day, you're gonna laugh, maybe. When I go to a Chinese restaurant and they say select this or select that, it comes to me immediately. Like the Holocaust is always hidden somewhere and it comes out. Select one from A, one from B. I don't want to select anything. It comes, I've been selected enough. So I just don't want, it's so interesting that it comes out when you in the least expect it. So there was a children's selection. All the children that I played with, all the kids that I spent, even those who used to hit me and those who didn't, everything. Yes? It was their time because they were liquidating the camp. They were getting rid of the camp. And they didn't have room for children. Besides, they knew that this camp was going to Auschwitz. And you may as well make it easier for the authorities in Auschwitz if you kill the children ahead of time. So you have a train called Kindesrein, clean of children. Those kids were put on trucks, and I am watching, and my mother's hand is getting tighter on me. And I see very noisy, lots of noise and screaming. I couldn't, German, Polish, I couldn't get the words. And some of the parents are huddling their children. Nobody went to work that day. Closer, huddling their children. And the Germans with their guns up, pulling the children away from the parents. Those parents who absolutely wouldn't let go, they would be allowed to go on the truck with the children. 1 or 2 babies were dismembered. Mother was holding onto the child. The German was pulling it apart. And pieces were put on a truck. This lasted, I don't know how long, hours, till every single child in the entire area was put into the truck. And that's where they were going, because a few days earlier, their parents had dug the graves. So my father, first time dug the graves for his parents, and now he dug the graves supposedly for his child, but I luckily wasn't there, for children. You see how they used us? At each step of the way, they used us to kill our own people, our children, our parents. It's good psychology, right? Those people don't want to live anymore. That's how you break them. That's how you break people. So it was after all the kids were on, it was silent. They rolled away far. The trucks went away, and we heard shooting far away. And I knew what was going on. I knew my father had dug that grave. So all the kids were shot, and I don't know how they were shot, whether they were shot first put in the grave or shot outside, and then everything was set fire. When I went to Poland, we found graves, some of them, and we said the Kaddish for those. The graves are all over Poland, the communal graves. Every so often, a few years ago, I read in the New York Times, another grave was found. People are still looking, trying to find the ashes and the bones so that maybe we can dig them up and give them a proper, burial. To me, all of Poland is nothing but a burial ground for the Jews. Nothing else. No more children were left. And my parents, again, my mother talks to me. She says, listen, you can't go outside on the street anymore. You can't be seen. I'm going to keep you in this room. I'm going to put something over the windows. There'll be no lights. But you should know that every night we'll come back. We will be here for you. You will come back. What was my choice? I said, okay, So she'd go in the morning. My mother and father would leave very early in the morning, and they would come back very, very late at night, and give me something to eat. They gave me whatever they had. And I remember this time as being, since I'm a therapist, it's sort of disassociation. What you do, what your mind does to protect you, you don't feel anything. It's like The Walking Dead. You have no pain, you have no fear, you have no hunger, you have no, I never cried. I just lay, I was just in this dark room, half asleep. I had nothing. We didn't own anything. I had no toys. I had no food. I had no one to talk to. And I don't know how long it lasted. Maybe 6 weeks, maybe more. Every day in this dark room. And my parents came at night. And, you know, my mother loved me. And then something happened which was interesting. Each time I talk about it, I get new memories. One day, I don't know why she was home. She didn't work, I don't know. I was in a room, it was daytime. In the daytime, I never went on the street, but I was around, you know, in the cabin when we heard steps. We heard an SS. We knew who he was. He wasn't the worst. He was a killer, but not. It's interesting how you would label different ones. We would know which one would kill you immediately, which one would torture you. It's like they became killing machines, but different type of killing machines. He knocked on the door. Our door was closed. Without a word, I hid behind her. And I remember standing, making my feet. I was little. I was 5, right? 5 and a half. She opened the door. She had to. Aufmachen. Open the door. You had to, right? Opens the door. I don't know what he wanted. And I'm behind her. And I'm trying to make my body to be completely covered by hers. He looked at her. 3 minutes of standing looking at her. I don't know what he said. He said very little. He just looked at her. We never know if he saw me because he walked away. He just went away. I don't know. And not miracle, I don't know if he saw us or not. Or maybe he wasn't in the mood to kill a child that day. I really don't know. Okay. Starvation became very difficult. More all the time. And they were now getting us ready to leave the camp. They were liquidating it. They were closing it. Remember, leave no witnesses. Everybody was cleaning. I didn't. I stayed in thing. And then my father says to her, they will have to see her now. We're going to Auschwitz. We have to walk on the street, he says. They'll have to see her. She says, well, we can't leave her here. So I remember she takes my hand. I'm in the middle. My father, my mother. She has a suitcase, tiny little suitcase. I don't know what she had in it. Some of the schmattes, some of the stuff that were hanging. We had no pictures. We had no food. We had nothing. By then, all the pictures were gone. We had nothing. So we're walking. And we look around. Everybody's walking. No child. I'm the only child. We come to the cattle cars. I see the Germans with the dogs. I was more scared of the dogs than of the Germans. I was petrified of the dogs. And they see me. I don't know what went through their heads. And they have clipboards. That's how we have all the records. Everything was on a clipboard. Every name, every child, every description, everything. They had these clipboards, and I don't know what happened. And my father is picking me up, and my mother is taking me from him, and she's holding me. And this is what he says to her. He says, we're separating now. That's the first time, by the way, that we're really separating. I'm going with the men. You're going to be with the women. We may meet in Auschwitz because it was the same train. They separated. They had so many cars for women and so many cars for women were on this side, men were on this side. And he says, just get her up. He kisses me, he's crying. He says, be a good girl. Again, I don't know what language. Must have been Polish. I didn't speak anything else. And he is shoved with a gun. He has to go to the men. My mother gets me into the cattle car, and there's a woman sitting there on the floor. And she says to her, You have a child. How'd you get a child? She lost 3 of her children on the truck. And she takes her hands and she touches me. And she cries. And I knew what it was. I knew what she meant. That I was like representing a child that's still alive. And then more and more people come. More and more and more and more and more and more women, and we have to stand up. First we were sitting. We were the first ones there. My mother, me, and this woman. Don't know who she was. She probably never survived. And and it's so hot because I'm the only child and I'm low, so I'm standing, my mother stands here, I'm standing to the right of her, people in front and women, front and back, and we squished. And the ride begins. And she said to me, you can just stand and sleep. There's no place to sit. There is just nothing. We're just gonna go. Puts a hand around me, and the trip begins. Screaming. The women were screaming and crying. The worst part was to go to the bathroom. There was no place to go. My mother said, go where you're standing. And I just went when I was standing. Everybody did. The train stopped a few times. It was a 3-day trip, apparently. I didn't know that. I was told later on. And I remember hands. Some hands. The hands were wanting something. There was a bucket that came through some window or through some door. I don't know what it was for. Whether it was drink, I didn't drink anything, or was to go to the bathroom. I just saw a bucket by the hands. And I slept, standing up. And I got up, and I slept, and I got up. And then the door opened. And I remember the door because the light, for the first time there was light. And they made a platform for us to go down. My mother takes my hand, still clutching her suitcase. With all of this, she had her suitcase, which to me is amazing as an adult, suitcase. Go down, there's it's hard to get off, so it's a tiny platform. And I'm down, and I look at the dogs, and I say to her, they're gonna eat me now. They're gonna kill me. And she said to me, they will not touch you. They are trained to kill only if you run. Will you run? I said, no. She said, then you've got nothing to worry about. And I believed her. You see what I'm saying? Whatever she said, she told me the truth. And I looked at the dogs. I was exactly their size, and they looked at me, and they had a hand. Somebody was holding them. I was afraid to look up. I don't know if I ever saw Mengele or anybody. I was afraid to look up. I looked at their belts here. And I looked at the dogs, and I saw their saliva. And they had a muzzle on. And I said to myself, I will stand so still that they won't even think that I'm going to run. And then my mother says something absolutely strange to me. She says, I have to leave you for a few minutes. I said, you're going to leave me? I have to find your father. I have to know what's happening to your father. You stand right here. Don't budge, or the dogs will get you. Don't budge. Hold the suitcase. Let nobody take your suitcase. Years later, I said to myself, she's going to a death camp, and she's worrying about the suitcase. It's years later. But at the time, I said, of course. I held that suitcase. Dogs are facing me. I'm standing as still as if I'm a statue, with a suitcase clutched to my hand, just like that. And she disappears. And people screaming and yelling. They were cleaning out our car, where we were for 3 days. There was people died from hysteria. I was still standing while they were getting, those who were alive got standing outside like me. You know, they were getting ready for the next step, but it takes time to get a whole train emptied. So they were cleaning, and I don't know what they were doing, I guess ready for the next batch of people. So I wasn't bothered by anybody. And then she comes back, and that's what she says to me. We are staying in Auschwitz. All the men who were in that train are going to Dachau. And your father's best friend was strangled by another person who went berserk. In fact, he said, in his car, there were lots of people who were killed by other people. There was violence there. Not in ours, by the way, not that I know of. But we're staying here. He's kissing you goodbye, she says. And he's covered with boils. Some kind of a disease broke out in 3 days. He's completely covered with boils. And he's leaving this place. Those are the words that she said. That's how I knew. I even knew later on who was the person who was strangled. And I had to tell his daughter, who also survived, how her father died. She didn't know. My father told my mother told me. I was 5.5, and she told me. Years later, I told my friend what happened. She was shocked. I didn't tell her. All the years, I just couldn't tell her that her father was strangled. But the conversation with my parents was always open, so that I knew the dogs wouldn't touch me. Just I wasn't going to run. Then she says to me, get undressed. I said, undressed? They had so many people. There was in 1944, they had to hurry up, that they had no more room in some of the buildings where people were being undressed and shaven. They undressed us right by the trains. And it wasn't cold. Well, it doesn't matter. It would have been cold. It would have happened anyhow. But I got undressed, and with pairs. She is my hand holding my hand, and then there are other people. And I said, "What are they doing?" And this is what she says to me. They are checking to see if our bodies have no disformity, diseases, pimples, whatever. Because if we do, if our bodies aren't perfect, this is what's going to happen to us. My mother points to the crematorium, to the left-hand side, with the smoke coming out, which was right by the train system, right by the arrivals. And I looked up, and I said to her, how do I look? And I'm naked, and I'm turning around. She says, you look beautiful. Perfect, she says. I said, what about you? She said, I am good too. And what she does, she takes her hands and hits her cheeks like that to make them nice and red, because whoever was coming to check, she'll have to look healthy. All this is happening right there with arrival. I see the women on this side, as far as my eye can see women. Some of them are going, running. And they want to run away because they know where they're going. They get shot while they're running. And I'm watching this. Why wasn't I killed? 99.9 children were killed right there and then. Later on, I found out there was another child also in the train, which then she be, my friend of mine. I'll tell you later if you want about her. A few years ago, my husband found a book on the internet discussing that transport. I don't know why they chose that transport. And you know what the person said? And he was a professor who came to speak at Rutgers, and I went to speak to him. We arrived on a Sunday. I never knew that. Sunday, the Germans, being Christians, did not want to work very hard. So they decided 4 or 5 crematorium were going strong. They didn't want to open up another one. They were going to wait till Monday. Isn't that a miracle? Had I arrived on a Sunday, or not on a Monday, I wouldn't have been here. Had I arrived on a Saturday, had I arrived, just timing, I arrived on a Sunday, and they were to start another one. They just had room, whatever they had room for. So they took me into Auschwitz. But before that, they was taking our clothes away. After I passed whatever inspection I was supposed to pass, they shaved my head. I remember standing on hair, and a woman who was shaving me. It's interesting. I had braids. I looked very Aryan, very blonde hair, and very blue eyes. In fact, when I was a baby, way back, a neighbor, Aryan woman, not an Aryan, but a Christian woman, wanted to take me and save me because I looked so Christian. And my mother said no. We were born Jewish. We were family. We will die together. She always said that. We are sticking together. We're not separating. So here am I, a blonde girl, and the woman picks me up on a bench. And she says to me, "You poor child, I have to cut your braids." And she did. Cut my braids and shaved my hair completely. Gave me something I'm 5'5". Gave me something to put on. And I can't find my mother because hair is such a important thing in your life, and I couldn't recognize it. But she found me. She takes my hand. This is before we entered somehow the gates. We enter, and we all go together, lots of people. And she takes me into one of those barracks, and we are assigned a middle shelf. I always call these shelves because that's how it felt to me. And she proceeds to teach me, before anybody else joined us, there were lots of people coming, how to live there, how to sit. And she said there'll be lots of people coming, how to turn, if they want to turn, how I should turn, how we can't dangle our feet outside. The feet and everything has to be inside, because if we dangle, we'll be hit. Those are the rules. She must have read the rules. And the worst rules, she said to me, I remember she said to me, "You will have to keep in if you have to go to the bathroom." I said, "How?" She said, "I don't know. I am doing it, and you'll be doing it. You cannot go to the bathroom when you want to. You have to go to the bathroom when all of us together are going to the bathroom. What if I have to pee?" You can't pee. You have to hold it in. So I remember thinking, I began to get very frightened. A thing like that frightened me. I thought I'll be killed if I do that. I began to learn how to hold in and only go. I think they took us in the morning. We got up in the morning. We all marched together to the bathroom. There were these slabs of wood with holes in them, big holes, because I lost my balance and I fell inside. And I was up to my knee in fish. But I wasn't afraid of that. There were mice. There was these gigantic mice, and I was holding my hands up. I remember I had no hair, so she couldn't pick me up. So she was trying to pull me up. So some other women came over and helped her I was the only child, to help me out. And then somebody, I don't know how, gave me a hose. And I remember standing naked there hosing me down. So that was an experience of God. It only happened once. It never happened again. From then on, I learned how to balance, to sit on the edge. Excuse me. It's interesting how you learn. You sit on the edge. If you go a little inside, you may fall in. So I was very good at it. The skills of survival become paramount when your life depends on it. The next thing that I found extremely difficult was the Appel, counting. I still don't know why I wasn't killed. The only child there among all the women. So hard to talk about this. We're standing outside for hours and hours and hours, counting. At one time, I was in the front row. I don't know how I ever got with my mother, always next to me. When I began to fidget, I just turned around. All of a sudden, I felt a hand right in here on me. A woman. Now, I didn't know there were women, Gestapo. I didn't know. You know what I had to do? I had to look it up on the internet. I said, is this my imagination? I remember a woman in a skirt. She dragged me out of the line. And she said to me, you will learn to stand still. And she started to hit me. My head was up like that. She was, I was 5.5. And she hit me like this, very, very, very hard. I didn't make a sound. I looked at my mother. Her eyes were looking at me, and I knew what she was thinking. If she helps out, she may be shot. She doesn't know. We didn't know what to do. It was like a nightmare. You didn't know. I knew that she wanted to help me, but she was afraid to say, leave her alone, or this is my daughter, or something. I'd be shot and she'll be shot. We didn't know what to do. So we just stood still. She hit me so hard and listened to my thoughts. I remember my thoughts. And I said to myself, you can hit me all you want. You will never know how much you hurt me. I will never cry in front of you. She got tired. And she shoved me back on line. And then, and she passed to the next group. There was lots of us. I began to heave like this, but no sound. Remember, I was taught never to make a sound. I went like this. I remember tears came. I cried throughout the whole time we were still standing. And when we went inside, I continued, but without a sound. It took me hours to stop this thing. I still remember crying, but not a sound, because any sound, I didn't know what the consequences were. Every morning or every evening, I don't remember, evening or morning, my mother would give me her food. And I'd say, I'm eating. I had a piece of something that size and some soup that was like coffee, that color. And I said, but you eating yours, I'm not hungry. My mother, I don't know how she survived. She gave me every single day a piece of her bread, and I was starving. All of a sudden, see, I only remember not so much the daily life as incidents, as a child remembers incidents. I can't see. Pus all over here. I can't open up my mouth. I can't even eat the food. It's stuck. And I say to her, I'm sick. She says, don't say that. I said, I can't see. I can't see. Somehow, sickness meant death. So she tried to keep it from anybody as long as possible. Somebody found out, came in, and took me away from her. Apparently, I didn't know, but years later my mother told me I had diphtheria and scarlet fever in Auschwitz. Nobody survives that. Sometimes even in America, without penicillin, you didn't survive it. I remember, and I just couldn't see, I couldn't open up my mouth, I must have been full of pus, and they took me somebody took me somewhere. And they opened the door. Now they had hospitals without doctors. They would put us in hospitals so the epidemic shouldn't spread to them. They had a gigantic troops there, 25,000 troops. They had parties, their wives came for weekends. I met somebody who cooked for them years later after the war. Everything, you know, it was a whole world outside of Auschwitz. They had all these people there. So, SS, I mean Germans. So they didn't want an epidemic. So I remember going into this place. I walked in and everybody is standing screaming and yelling. And I don't remember anything else because it must have been very high fever. I remember the next step. The door opened and a woman, not my mother. I didn't see my mother for a long time after that. Opened the door, took me out, and gave me a pair of shoes. And she said, "You're well now." I didn't know I was sick. I mean, I knew that I couldn't see, and I don't know the process of being ill. That part I don't remember, being inside the hospital, because I had no one to talk to, and I must have had very high fever. And she gave me a pair of white shoes. I haven't been in shoes for a long time. I don't know what I wore, some kind of wooden stuff. And I didn't know how to put them on. I said, "Shoes." And that's how I knew my age. She said to me, a little child, 5.5, should know how to put on a pair of shoes. And then I said, "I'm 5.5. And then she took me somewhere, and we began to walk. And we walked, and we came to this other camp. My mother wasn't there, but there was something I never knew before. There were other children that I knew, children that were from Tomaszów, Mazowiecki, from the first ghetto, who were disappearing. I told you that I didn't know where they were. Apparently, they also went through a different route to a different labor camp, and they ended up in Auschwitz, and they ended up in the children's camp. Now, the children's camp was a late invention in a sense because they had no room. They killed the children right away as they arrived. But those, for some reason, who were saved, like me, for just luck, were put into that camp only after all the gypsies were exterminated. Because that camp was called the Zigeunerlager, the gypsy camp. After there were like 40,000 gypsies in 2 or 3 days. Well, they 10,000 a day were exterminated. So it took maybe 4 days. No gypsies left. Now the children. Now it's their turn. So here I met people. In fact, when I was hidden in that room that I was for 6 weeks by myself, locked up in the room, I thought that I was the last Jewish child left on earth. I thought that every Jewish child was killed, and I had to survive because I was the last child left. Now I meet all these other children, and in a sense I was delighted. You know, I knew their names, I knew who they were, and they were right next to the barrack of the twins. So then I learned about experiments. It was like, in the beginning we talked to each other. Where were you? Where's your mom? So forth. But when we walked in, they tattooed me. So we walked in after 2 or 3 days. They lined us all up. And I remember being online. And when they tattooed me, I was utterly fascinated. I saw the needle going in and out, putting ink inside, in and out, in and out. 27,633 with an A. A probably for Auschwitz. And I was looking at it, and the woman who tattooed me said these things to me. She was a young woman. She must have been 17, 18. She was killed right after she did all the tattooing. Again, they used us, our own people, to destroy us. She tattooed us. She was a Jewish prisoner. And as soon as she finished her job, she was gassed. And she said this to me. She said, you know, I'm going to give you a very small number, very small. In case you survive, you'll be able to cover it up with a sleeve and you won't be embarrassed. And then she said, she gave me a rag, a little rag. She says, take this rag, put it in water, and then take it and press it very hard after I tattoo you. Don't rub because it'll swell. If you press it hard, there'll be no swelling and it'll hurt you less. And she said, what's your name? My name was Tola. She said, no, from now on, it's 27,633. Give me the, say it. I didn't know what numbers were. I didn't know what thousands were. I didn't know anything. And she says to me, and I say, 27,633. She says, remember it, learn it, remember it, your life may depend on it. Here was another lesson. I had all these lessons that my life was dependent, and I was going to learn it. So I remember walking away from her saying, 27,633, 27,633. So when they called us, I knew, I was so proud. I knew the number right away. I learned it. Not only did I learn my number, but I learned the number of the girl I slept with. There were a few people on these beds, and her number was something else because when she died of starvation, I dragged her in the morning to the front of the room where all the kids had died that night, and I knew her number. And they called her number. I said, oh no, she's here. Her number is 27, such as whatever it was. And we didn't have to wait, because if she didn't answer, there would be a search or something. There would be things going on. They would be in a bad mood. We had to have our numbers. Our numbers had to be immediate. So we learned them right away, and I learned hers. So I was, again, proud of my accomplishment. There's no delays. They got through the numbers, and we could do whatever, which I'm not even sure what we did there. But let me tell you how smart kids are, how smart. We used to play games, and the game would be like this. You would, let's say you were 6 years old, or 5. You would take a 3-year-old, and you say to the child, you know, I saw your mommy and daddy, and I think I also saw your grandparents. And the child would be shocked. You did? You saw my parents? But how could you? You don't even know how they look like. You don't know my parents. Oh, yes, I do. And they would take the 3 or 4-year-old child to the window and show them how the smoke rose. This is your mom. This is your dad. And I think your grandparents are following. These were the games. We all knew that eventually we are going to be smoke. We just knew it. It was a matter of time. So sometimes the older kids, again, would play violent games. They would, you know, there was, in the middle of the room was like a stove. It was used in the wintertime for warming a little bit. It was made out of brick all the way across, and the bunk beds were on both sides. So at night, a kid would stand up on this, let's say 7-year-old and 8-year-old, and would start scaring the other children. Play games of voices and like that. I'd wake up, I'd open my eyes, and I see this other person, which was a child older than I by 2 or 3 years, but there was a big difference, running on this stove, scaring the kids, scaring me. But I knew who they were. I had a friend who survived with me. She went to therapy said that she's got these nightmares of somebody scaring her and so forth. When she told me about it, I told her, no, this really happened. These are not nightmares. This is what happened to us in Auschwitz. And she was amazed that I remembered it, and she was completely relieved. My memory was so sharp. I knew what was going on. I accepted it, but I knew. And then the Mengele, oh my God. Dr. Mengele, again, brilliant doctor. We used to go into the courtyard, and next door were the twins. The kids from the twins' barrack would tell us everything what's going on. They told us about well, I didn't know what anesthesia was, but they said they would do it with nothing, just take out an eye of twins, identical twins, switch them, and see whether one feels the pain of the other. They would take a little child and put it in boiling water, and another child, twins, in ice water, to see if the twin who's in ice water feels the heat of the child in the boiling water. All these are recorded, by the way. The books are open. We can all read it. I will never read that stuff. So, and I have two sets of twins, which I'll tell you about, which I'm very happy about. So, one day, I get a package. Unbelievable, right? It's a package. It's a material package made out of blue material, some kind of material. Inside there's something, and there's a string around it. That means that you have to put it around your neck, whatever's inside. It was my birthday. It was my 6th birthday in Auschwitz. My mother sent me could you believe it? A birthday gift. How did I know? Somebody there read it. Happy birthday, Tova. That birthday, by the way, gift, I think later on cost her her life. And I'll tell you how. I think. I don't know anything. I thought about it a lot. I open up the bag and it's a piece of bread. And it's about this size, like a chunk of bread. It was the best gift you can get. And my thought was this: I'm not going to eat it until I am on my deathbed. My bunkmate just died of starvation. But I won't die of starvation because I will have the bread. But I'm not eating it because I'm not dying now. So I kept it inside here for days, thinking this is my insurance. When I'm just saying, I'm dying, I'm just going to die, I'll take a piece of bread and it'll revive me. This was my childish, I didn't know about bread getting stale. I knew nothing about bread. I never had bread to take care of. In the middle of the night, I'm sleeping. Rats that size came. I could hear them. I could hear the feet. I could hear the noise. Tore my clothing, ate up the entire bread. What's the miracle? They didn't touch me. I had no scars. I had no bites. I had no scratches. How could that happen? You would think they're wild rats on the body. A miracle? I don't know. They didn't touch me. So, but I had no bread. And everybody was saying, you should have eaten it. I didn't know. I mean, there were kids who were very savvy. There were kids who somehow got cigarettes from somebody. Somebody smuggled in some cigarettes. And I didn't know what that was. But I saw, and they would sell a puff for a bite of bread to the Jewish prisoners. I don't know how all this worked, but I saw it happening. I saw kids who had an apple, and they would sell a bite of an apple for a piece of bread, because bread was the bottom line. Everything else was extra. Bread was really what we knew will keep you alive. And sometimes in the daytime, after we spoke about all the experiments and so forth, they were like, we went for a walk and there were dead bodies everywhere. And we were told to pry up, to remove them from the ice and pick them up, 2 or 3 of us, we were kids, and carry them over to a little room. That when I opened that room, it was piled from top to bottom with corpses, cut up corpses, pieces. And it was all frozen, because it was all frozen, it was freezing outside. And we did that. So it wasn't a job, it was something we did so we could walk. And our capos, or whoever they were, they were also Jews, of course. The women who took care of us told us to do it, so we did it as children. So again, how do I connect this piece of bread? Later on, years later, I asked my mother, how could you get a piece of bread in Auschwitz, piece of bread like that? And not only this, but bribe somebody to give it to me. She said she worked in a field, there were some potatoes. She stole 1 or 2 potatoes. And she traded it, she bartered the potatoes for a piece of bread. In order to give that bread to me, she had to give another piece of that bread to somebody else. And somebody found out, one of the Germans or somebody found out that she was doing bartering, and that she stole 2 potatoes. They beat her. They beat her so hard in her head, she said, that from then on she had headaches. Terrible, terrible headaches. And she died when she was 45 years old. She said she had a headache. She lay down on the couch and never woke up. So in some way it's connected, because the headaches started from the time when she was so beaten, so she could give me a piece of bread, which I didn't even eat. So I never told her about that. I never told her that I didn't eat the bread after the war. I didn't want her to know that. In fact, I never spoke about the war. You know what she said to me? You are so lucky. You don't remember anything. You're a child. And I said, you're right. I don't remember anything. Because she would cry every single day when I came home from school in America. Every single day she said, we have to talk. I said, I have homework. She said, we have to talk. And she told me about the death of her family. And then she told me something that I want to tell you now about it, because it's sort of connected. She told me the story. She said that she will live with it till she dies. And she said to me, I hope I die soon, about herself. She was standing on line with me. I was about 2 years old. She was holding me, and my father. Her sister, the only one that was still alive, that she knew where she was standing next to her. And she had 2 children. They came to a table where the person behind the table, the SS man, was deciding left or right, to death or to work, to death or to work. Her sister was pointed to death. She and my father had working papers, was pointed to life. Her sister pushed her 2 little children, who were 4 and 5, to come to my mother. She told them to go. They ran over to her and they clutched her skirt, as if she was part of the family. And my mother didn't know what to do. They were her sisters, they were her nieces, I think a boy and a girl. They were standing on line, she said, and the person in front of them had done the same thing. He was trying to save a child from somebody who was sent to death. And the SS person said, how many people are you in a family? He gave some number, 3 or 4. They looked, he said, you're lying to me. Are you trying to save somebody? And they shot them, the entire family, on the spot. My mother and father are the next. And they asked the same question. How many people are you? On the piece of paper, whatever they had, it said 3. She was going to say 5 because she wanted to save the little nieces and nephews. She said the truth. She said 3. She was so scared. The guy didn't even open it up. He took her word. Her entire life, she said to me, I should have said 5. He wouldn't have checked it because he didn't check the 3, and I could have saved those 2 little children. Instead, she had to send them back to their parents because she was scared that he'll kill us all. She lived with this over and over again. She told me that story. So my whole high school years were inundated with that. So I had to tell you that because I always think of her, how brave she was, but after the war she couldn't handle it. She wanted to die. So all of a sudden, the next door barrack, block, they called it the block, barrack, is empty, starts again. We kids are saying to each other, it's our turn. They're gone, again, they're gone. Where are these people? We used to walk with them on the street. We used to walk with them. They're gone. So I said to myself, you know what? It's about time. I want to die. I didn't know, I wasn't sure I knew exactly what it was. I want to go to the crematorium. So that morning, they gave us a most delicious breakfast, something sweet. Don't forget, we were starving. We were starving. Something sweet, it was like a porridge and had substance. It wasn't just water. And I was ready to go. This meal was everything I wanted. I didn't care about anything. I wanted to eat. They're getting us ready, we get dressed. Very cold outside. We walk. And I'm a little girl. I'm one of the little ones. So we're in the back. I and another little girl. And we're walking. We're passing the bodies that are frozen on the ground, but this time we're not touching them because we have to get somewhere. They're waiting for us. It was our turn. And then I hear a voice with my name, Tola. I haven't heard that. I'm 27,633. I said, must be my mother. She's the only one who knows my name, yeah? And she's calling, and I look to my, kids don't know directions, but it was to my right hand, and there are all these women standing by these fences, and they look terrible. They look half naked, and they're yelling, what's going on? And I said, we're going to the crematorium, Mom. And they start screaming. And you know what I said to the person next to me? I remember saying, I don't understand why they're crying. Isn't it true that every Jewish child has to go to the crematorium? What are they crying about? And we started walking. And we walked for 15, 20 minutes or so. I don't know the exact time, under a half hour. And by the time we arrived, we were frozen. Some of us didn't even have shoes. We come to a building that has steps. You should go down the steps, and we come to a place that's very open, like a big hall, gray walls, cement, big hall, with hooks everywhere. And they say to us, you hang up your clothes in such a way where you will know exactly when you come out, because you're getting a shower, exactly where your clothes are. So I hang up my clothes. I look at my feet, and I see who's next to me on this side, who is next to me on that side, so I can recognize it when I come out. We knew we weren't coming out, but we didn't. You know, I don't know how adults felt, but I felt, I believe that we're coming out, and I know we're not coming out. So it was like, I believe both at the same time. And we undressed naked, completely naked. And it's very cold. It was very cold. We were cold even arriving there. And they're screaming and yelling. There were some women in uniforms. There were some men. They had, again, the clipboards, the terrible clipboards. And they were checking off, and they were screaming and yelling, and we stayed naked for hours. And then somebody came over to us and screamed some orders, which somebody told us what to do, because we kids didn't even understand the orders. Go back. You are the wrong transport. We were supposed to take a different barrack. We were supposed to take boys now. That's what I remember. I remember that. And they're getting us, and we have to get dressed in a hurry because somebody else is coming. They made a mistake. A miracle. They made a mistake. I don't know. And we're starting to walk back. And the women are still outside, and I hear screaming, "What happened? What happened?" And I said, they couldn't, these are my exact words. They couldn't do it this time. They will do it next time. That's what I said. And we got back into the barracks. And when we got back, a day or so later, there was such chaos. Chaos. I didn't know all that the Allies were on the way. I didn't know that the Allies were coming. I didn't know what was outside. To me, the whole world was the barrack, right? And every meals, whatever little bread we had, some got it, some didn't get it. Some of the people who took care of us were hysterical, and then my mother appears. I've not seen her in such a long time. I heard her voice, but I didn't know almost who I didn't recognize her. She was swollen. Like, you see, before you die of starvation, you swell, you have water. And I could tell how long, we all kids could, we'd walk around and we'd say, she's got 2 weeks left. She's got 4 days left. We knew there was here in the back, there is a sign where you are starving and your stomach gets, bloated, and your feet get all with water. She looked like somebody I didn't know. And she recognized me right away, and she said to me, "Listen," she said, "they are making us march. They are taking all of us, remember, leave no witnesses. They're taking all of us to Germany. Look outside, it's freezing, snowing. Look at me. I will not make it. I'm going to be shot on the walk." It was known as the Death March later on. You can survive it. You look like you can walk. Maybe. I don't want you to live in this world by yourself. I don't want you to survive. I don't know where anybody is. I don't know where the family is. I don't want you to survive here without me. Will you die here with me, right here with me? I said yes. She asked me, and I said yes. She took my hand. By then, it was such a chaos that as we walked out of the barrack, we saw people running. Some of the Germans were changing their clothes. It was like chaos. And she went through everything, just went, held my hand tightly until she came to a building. And apparently it was a hospital. It was a women's hospital. I didn't know. And she went, she was very, very controlled. It was quiet there. Everybody was ill. And she was walking from bed to bed, touching the corpses. There were more corpses than live people. And she came to a corpse. They must have just died. A young woman. And she uncovered her. She says, "Get in." And I got in, And she manipulated my head in such a way, she put my head this way with my breathing towards the floor. One of my feet was between her legs, and what she did, she could maneuver the person who was still warm. She must have died maybe minutes before. And she took her hands, covered me all the way up to here. I was here, and her hands were right here like this. That's how she was lying there. And she said to me, "No one will uncover you except me. Whatever you hear, whatever happens, you are not to budge, and you are dead like." I knew exactly what she meant. And she disappeared. I didn't know where she went. Later on, she took another corpse. I didn't know that, you know. So I'm lying there very still, and I am not afraid. My thoughts were, I'm warm. I had a blanket on. First, a good blanket, I'm warm. This corpse was still a little warm, wasn't yet cold. I was comfortable. And whatever happens, happens, and my mother is near me, near somewhere. Again, hear the Germans, that boots will always be for the rest of my life. Come in, heraus, 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 out, heraus, out. I don't budge. And the shooting starts. Whoever can budge physically, I can hear them pulling and screaming and pushing. I don't budge. Lots of shooting. And then I hear silence, but I smell fire. I smell smoke. I don't budge. I would have been burned to death. I did not budge. All of a sudden, she comes over, she uncovers me, and those are her words. They are gone. What must have happened was the Russians were so close that they were just running away with whatever they could, whatever death, which is, they wanted Auschwitz to have no witnesses. They were all half bodies lying in everywhere, in the ovens. There were half bodies sticking out. And I remember she said, "Get up." And I had to find some shoes. She took my hand. And I'm still wearing whatever I was wearing in the bed. I don't even know what. I think I had everything, but I didn't have shoes on. So she put whatever, some kind of clogs, I don't know. And we're walking towards the electrified, barbed wires, and everybody from all different places is walking. And not only this, but when I got up out of bed, there were other people who've also hidden with the corpses. Anybody who didn't want to walk. And we all went to the barbed wires. And a few hours later, the Russians came. And I remember it was like, we're standing there, my mother's holding my hand, and the Russians have trouble stopping the electricity. They yell, they talk, they have instruments, they try, they go. I remember it was a good 20 minutes for them to find the way to get into the camp. And when they went to camp, they were shocked. Shocked what they saw. And the first thing they did, they gathered all the children. That must have been probably 5, 6 hours after they arrived, because the first thing they did, they fed us. And I'll tell you about the eating. And here am I, showing my number. It's me. My hair by then had grown in a little bit. Showing my tattoo to the Russians. Of 57 children, I think, survived under the age of 8. Everybody else was gone. And that was January 27, 1945. Had they come a week later, I wouldn't have been here, because they were increasing the machinery of killing. They were trying to kill as many as, before the Allies come, as quickly as possible. And that was my liberation. But I must tell you, we stayed 6 months in Auschwitz, not knowing what to do, not knowing where to go. My mother was in utter shock. They fed us. In the beginning was great. We had bread, but what my mother did was this. She said to me, listen, let me take you around and show you how people are dying from overeating. You can't eat Russian army food, which what they cooked for us, heavy, without dying, without, your stomach will burst. And she showed me how people were dying of dysentery. People, so many people died in Auschwitz, even after the liberation, because of diseases, because of trauma, and a lot because of this kind of eating. So she gave me, she said, you'll only eat what I give you. So the first time she gave me dry bread. For a day or two I ate only dry bread. The second day she gave me dry bread and butter. The third and fourth day she gave me dry bread, butter, and sugar. That's how she got me used to eating. And then what she did was something interesting again. When I look back, I'm not sure I would have had that kind of courage to do. She took me around Auschwitz as if she wanted to say to me, you remember this, you'll be the speaker. That's what I think she did, because why would she do that? She showed me people, all the teeth, because everything was open. She showed me eyeglasses. She showed me little children's shoes. She says, I want you to see all of this. And then she went to a place where there were lots and lots of jackets, furs and coats and everything. And she says, look, I'm very cold. I have nothing to wear. You see, she said, I can take any of these furs, but I'm not going to. I am going to take a man's coat and I'm going to cut it down. So anybody who sees me wearing it will not think I took it because I loved the style of the coat. Like if I were to take a fur coat from somebody who was killed, that I took this coat because I'm cold. So she took a very heavy, she went in there, took a very heavy coat from some man, of a dead coat, a coat that was somebody who was gassed, I guess, cut the bottom, and that's what she wore all through Auschwitz in the winter. And then she said, let me show you something else. She took me to another place where they had shades made of human skin for lamps, lampshades. She said to me, this is human skin. I want you to remember this. Then she took me to another place where they had cakes of soap. She said, this is human fat and soap. She said, I think we should take it with us. I said, you can take it, I'm not touching it. She said, then I'm not going to take it. I said, don't take this, don't touch this. She took me everywhere. She spoke to me as if she's saying to me, you'll have to, I never thought of that before. But what's interesting is, after the war, she thought I didn't remember anything. At 6.5, she showed me these things. When I was 15, she said to me, you probably don't remember much, right? You're a child. So there's these two things there.
So you stayed in Auschwitz for, you said 6 months?
Maybe something like that, yeah. To get adjusted, to eat, to get some strength. And I want to show you, then the Red Cross came. And this is, I have the original one, but this is a copy of it. This is what they gave us when we left Auschwitz. This is sealed and signed by the Red Cross, and it's my mother's name and her number. You see, this is her number, her birthday. And I think it says something about consider these people, have consideration for them. They meant to help us get where we have to go because we had no money. We looked like vagabonds. We had no money, we had no clothes, we were terrible. So this showed that we really are not, you know, homeless, that we just came from concentration camp.
In a small discussion that I had with you when I met you a few weeks ago, you had mentioned after all of this was done, when you actually finally did leave Auschwitz, that you found your father again.
Yes, that's later on. Yes, I'll tell you about that. We went home. We were there for about a year and a half. And then we had a terrible condition. We had no place to live. We lived in a cellar. We had hardly any food, even coming back to Poland. And there were these young people, mostly teenagers, strong young guys, who were looking for their own families. And they traveled all over Europe. And so there was very little communication. These people came and took lists of names of the survivors. Somebody came to our place and took we were only 300 survivors, and took our names, and he
From your town, that
from my town,
used to have
yes,
30,000.
300 from 15,000, and 4 children survived from 5,000 children. 4 children and I'm the youngest child of their town. Right now, the 2 of us left. And he took that piece of paper to go, and he went to Dachau to look for his family, and he showed people where he was already, and those are the survivors. And my father found my name and my mother's name surviving, and he got back from Dachau.
See, that to me is astonishing. Just knowing what I've read in history about how families, like, for instance, your aunt,
Yes.
she lost everybody. I mean, your mother, you said.
My mother lost
every single one of her siblings.
This is, by the way, a picture of me and my mother after the war, when I couldn't come to America right away because they found I had TB. So they put me into a sanatorium for a year after the war. And it's one of the visits to me. She only came 2 or 3 times in 1 year because it was so far away. And till I got healed, and then they let me come to this country.
See, now the thing that amazes me is how growing up in this country, of course, we learn our history, we learn about World War II, but it's very technical. It's the numbers, the 6 million dead. There's nothing that's presented that can make you comprehend like the experience that you had. Now, here's the thing. I never truly had, and I'm a bit of a history buff, so I read up on these things. I watch documentary films, but I never really saw the full scope of the atrocity until I was about 35, when I found myself in a position where I was watching a 2-part documentary called The Rise and the Fall of the Third Reich.
Yeah.
And this documentary was strictly made from archive film. It was made from the films of, like, the Nazi soldiers, like their home movies that they took on vacation, you know.
Right.
And towards the end of the second documentary, they presented the archive footage of after Auschwitz was liberated, when they forced the surrounding townspeople who were
I saw that one.
Yeah.
I saw that, to come and
look
what happened.
Them to walk through.
Exactly. I saw that.
Yeah.
They were holding, their mouth from the smell. I saw the movie.
Now I'm seeing this, and for the first time in color, I'm seeing the piles of bodies, and I'm seeing what is so intensely censored in this country. And I kept thinking to myself, if I were to see this when I was in high school, when I was 12, 13, it would have had a much greater impact on me as to how horrendous this situation was.
Well,
and it wasn't just a number. They wouldn't just be numbers to me. That to me was life. That was reality.
But
the other thing that people fail to comprehend. Again, I'll go back to the history books. The war has ended. The camps are liberated. As far as anybody else is concerned, you shut the book. You go back home and you go down to the corner store and buy your bread and milk and go on with your life. That didn't happen, did it? What was your life like when you finally actually made it back home?
Back home meaning Tomaszów Mazowiecki.
Yes.
I walked in, just gotten off a train, because people were courteous and they let us go by train for free, probably because of this card. Walked into the town, my mother's holding my hand, and she meets a neighbor that she knew before the war. And the neighbor looks at her and says to her, "What are you doing back here? I thought that Hitler killed you all." That was the first word that I heard when we walked into town and we met somebody we knew. Then my mother took me around again and showed me where my grandmother used to live, where we used to live, nothing there but rocks. Everything is broken down. And every day, she would sit down with me on one of those rocks and buy me like a donut with jelly in it, I remember. And she would tell me the story of her family in this town, where our family lived for 200 years. I have a family tree that people live there. And where this was our house, here was our parents, this is where she met my father, in this park. She was reconstructing for me what wasn't anymore, because she kept saying to me, "You will never know the kind of wonderful family you came from, because you'll never meet anybody." That was even before we knew that my father was alive. So it was a very difficult time. And when I went to school, she decided we have to go to school. I went to first grade. I was 7 by then, I think. They called me Dirty Jew, and they threw rocks. And I came home and I said, "I'm not going. I am not going anymore to school. I had enough of being a dirty Jew." And I said to her, "I'm going to become a Christian. I'm not going to be the Jew anymore." And then I remember her saying, she hit me. She said, "After all what we suffered and how we made it and we survived, you are talking against being a Jew?" I didn't even know what it was yet. But years later, I began to study about Judaism, and I became an observant Jew, very involved. And I lived in Israel for many years, because I wanted my children never to hear that word again. So it was a very difficult time. I couldn't go to school. I couldn't even sit in school till I was 12 when I came to this country.
I remember reading many accounts of people who survived the Holocaust, and then upon the realization that they survived and they will continue to live, not so much as they didn't want to be a Jew anymore, but they completely lost their faith permanently. They would, how can there be a God if things like this happen?
It's interesting, that's true. My mother lost her faith. She came from a very, very Orthodox family. Rabbis, they were the first ones killed. That's why they had so many children. She had 150 people. They came from the Hasidim. Hasidim are special, very Orthodox, from the Gera Hasidim, which is a very special, very educated, very fine Orthodox Jews. Every one of them was killed. She lost her faith. My father didn't. My father was able to handle it better. And when I became of age to know more about Judaism as an adult, I loved it. I loved it, but I still ask that question. How could a God have done that, if there is a God? And when my father buried the dead, and he made the prayer, the Kaddish, which doesn't talk about death but praising God. Here he is in a ghetto, burying his friends. They were just shot, and he's saying a prayer praising God. That was very hard as an adult to understand that. But as people say, we don't know why, and we may never know why. And then we have Israel, which is just a beacon of hope. It's fabulous. I was there for 10 years. It's a wonderful place to be. So we don't know. Life is very strange.
Your life continuing the years after the war. But I mean, was there any sense of government? Was there any sense of authority or anything?
When? Where?
In back immediately after the war, when you returned home.
Oh,
for
there were the
years
Russians.
Yeah.
That was the interesting part of it. The Russians came and it became communist. Poland became communist, and those same people who freed us now we were their prisoners. They freed us in Auschwitz, and now we couldn't leave Poland if we wanted to. We were really scared of the Russian army. It was a completely different type of an attitude than we had when they freed us. In fact, you know one of the irony? We had to sneak out of Poland because the borders were closed. And where did you think we snuck to?
Germany.
Germany, Berlin, to the American side of Berlin. And from that we went to a DP camp. So irony of life, you know, this is the person who frees you, and this is the person who keeps you prisoner. It's the same person. Different side of the border, different hour, different time, different part of history.
Yeah. See, to me, that's the untold story. That's the story that people don't know. What happened the years after the war?
Terrible. The years after the war was most people could not recuperate. Then they had nervous breakdowns, which they couldn't afford while they were fighting for their lives. The positive thing is sort of that in a DP camp, 1,000 children were born, I think, a month, because people had to undo and heal and make. So, for instance, if you met somebody in a DP camp, you were from the same town and you knew the same people, you were family. I've known hundreds of couples where she lost husband and children, saw them killed in front of her. He buried his wife because they just shot her. These two people knew each other once. They married and had a family. Had children right away. So it's an interesting about human spirit, wanting to rebuild, and many of the children who were left orphans went straight to Israel. Convoys of people came, a representative of Israel came, took those children, put them in homes in Israel or in kibbutz, and those people helped build the country. Those children, without any education, with seeing her parents murdered right in front of them, were the ones who started building the country. And they became pretty important people in Israel. Isn't it ironic?
Yeah. Yep.
Beautiful. Well, I have 4 children, 8 grandchildren. 4 of them, 2 sets are twins. We never had twins in our family at all, either side. And I sort of feel the souls of the twins are coming to us. And now I'm taking those twins to Auschwitz to show them. There are 12 and a half and 15 and a half to show them. And I myself spent my life, in a sense, being a therapist, to see if I can't change what happened, I can try to help and ease pain of some people. I've been a therapist for many years and a director of an agency. I just feel that this is sort of my thank you for being saved.
Right.
It's my thank you to whatever. I'm here, I've got it now. My obligation now is to do everything I can to speak about it, to tell children about it, to go to school. I get a lot of thank yous. I have met kids who heard me 10 years ago, who still remember. This is just one pile, I got this last week, of letters from individual children who heard me speak. I hope it has an effect on them. I hope that one day when they become politicians or something, they'll remember that type of prejudice and the hatred of the other, the suspicion of other, may lead to something like that if it's not checked. So I spend a lot of time. One year I spoke to 7,000 people. I go to Midwest, I speak there. I went to Florida, I spoke there. I speak here in New Jersey anytime anybody asks me, because it's so important. First, I don't want to forget. I don't want to forget those that I remember that were murdered. And I want those children to sort of get it so that when they'll grow, they'll have power. Why did Hitler kill the children first? He was worried that they'll grow up and they'll remember. Children have a lot of power if you treat them, if you teach them the right way. This is why he got rid of the children, and that's why I speak to the children. Because he got rid of them. That's who I speak to a lot.
How do the children typically react to your conversation with them?
So well, so positively, that and they're so smart. They ask questions like, how can you still believe in God? Some adults are afraid to ask that question. They ask open questions. They're completely open, and they ask me, how did I feel when I watched somebody die? Or how did I feel when I had my first piece of bread after the war? They are very in tune. And from the thank you letters, which every single class I speak to sends me thank you letters. I have at least 1,000. So I know, and not only this, I once met this man who, I didn't recognize him, but an adult with children. He had 2 little kids with him, and he said to me that because he heard me speak in high school, he studied, got his degree, PhD in history of that period, and he's teaching now in college. He's teaching the Holocaust in college because he heard me years ago and he saw how important it was. I think that, I hope that the effect is good. Do I trust the human nature? No, I don't. What's going on right now, I really don't. But everybody has to do what they can. That's the only thing I can do. That's the only thing. I can speak about it. I can make everybody aware of what happened. Let them think about their own feeling of anger towards somebody or suspicion or whatever. And then to become a therapist and help those who want to come to me in some way. Help them live a less painful life. That's all I can do. And I hope the kids who listen will do the same.
The things that your mother did for you, and I'm now fixated on what you said about after everything, when you had returned home, and she would sit you on the side of the river and buy you a jelly donut. I mean, you think back to that. What goes through your head? Like what? How do you feel she held it together?
She didn't hold together. She went into a coma. When my father arrived and took over, she lived long enough to launch me. She died when I was one semester in college. I just entered college. where we were sitting was not a river, but on these rocks from our house. This is the house that fell, that was bombed. It was on those rocks. She needed to, what's the word, rebuild the life that I would never know in my head by describing everything to me. And she did it while I was eating, because she knew I will connect it to how important it was for me to eat. Because so I still remember it was a jelly donut, and every day she did that with me. And she told me about my aunts that died and were murdered, and this person and that person and this person. She couldn't let them die. I think it's true of every survivor. We can't let our families die, because if they die, then Hitler would have won. So we keep them alive, we talk about them, we think about them, we make movies about them. You know how many movies I've seen of people who have documented their families from pictures, from those that are surviving. Can't just let all die. Can't annihilate 6 million people without resurrecting as much as you can. And that's what I'm doing. And that's what she was doing with me. Resurrecting her family, telling me stories about her sister and her brother and her nephews, and this one went to university, and this one could play ball, and this one, they're gone. Everything is gone. And then she was, of course, worried that I remember too much and it's going to upset me. So she said, you don't remember too much, right? She was worried that I remember. She was worried about the Auschwitz experience. That's what really scared her. How I will grow with that experience, or being hidden in a room for 6 weeks. So she said, I don't think you remember that. Remember? I said, no, I don't remember anything, because I had to save her. We were saving each other, which is very common in a Holocaust relationship. You know, I know a friend of mine who mother's a Holocaust survivor. The girl who went to college, she broke an arm. She would never tell her mother. Her mother would be hysterical. So she waited until the arm healed to tell her that she had broken her arm. It's a protection. They've had enough, you know. Everything is a calamity.
To me, that's the definition of an undying love, though. That's, you know.
This is why I have these pictures, and a picture of my aunt that was killed, and my wonderful family. That is, you know, some of it. This is a picture. That's many years ago. They're much older now. But on my telephone, we have much more pictures. You know, there has to be life, you know, with my children, with my grandchildren. The idea that I have grandchildren who want to go to Auschwitz with me, and they're twins, and they're well, and they're interested, and it's just a miracle. It's a miracle. I could have told you that there were 4 or 5 times during the war that there was no way they could have escaped. Arriving on the train, Sunday, a miracle. That day, it's a miracle that they didn't want to open up another crematorium. The guy seeing me, I think he saw me when I hid behind my mother. The SS that walked in while I was hidden in that room, he must have seen my feet or something. How? Didn't say a word, walked through. Each time something came up, or they got the wrong transport. How often did the Germans get the wrong transport, where everything is written down exactly? I was in there. All they had to do was open the door. I was naked, waiting to walk in. All they had to do was open the door, and 20 minutes later, none of us would have been there, none of the children. That was the last of the children. from my town.
How do you, in your head, how do you justify that? Is that luck? Is
No,
that, is
luck.
that God? Is that?
It has to be luck. It has to be luck, because if it's not an accident or luck, then I feel that I'm better than others and that others died, and I can't live with that, because it's not true. I am not better, I wasn't smarter, I wasn't anything. It just life happens. I wasn't chosen to live. I wasn't, because I couldn't. I would say to myself, you mean all these wonderful people, these educated, they weren't chosen, but I was? No. But I have a price to pay for this. And the price is that I have to talk about it. I have to make sure that the other people are not forgotten as much as possible. And that I have to lead a life that, it's hard. When I leave it, I'm 78. I like to say if I leave it, it's when I leave it. I would have left some people happier because I'm alive. Because I was saved, I feel an obligation. I feel an absolute obligation. Whether it is to see a client on a Sunday because they can't make it during the week, whether letting them call me at home where they're in crisis and not charging them. Time is not money. Time is just time that I'm happy to give.
But in a way, that has to be your own kind of therapy, though.
It is. Yeah. It's 100% my therapy. One of my friends who stood right in front of me in line has a number ahead of me, one number, same age as I am, or was, committed suicide 3 or 4 years ago by now, by gassing herself. She survived Auschwitz. She couldn't talk about it to anybody. So about a few years ago, she and her husband, she wasn't ill, and her children told me, neither of them were ill. Her husband was not a survivor, but he was holding her. She went into a car in her garage and put on the ignition and had the
exhaust.
The exhaust killed her. Mm-hmm. She was found dead in the morning. Couldn't talk about it. She had it in her head all the time. I kept saying to her, you absolutely have to talk. Come with me. We'll do it together. I'll show you. It's easy. The first time is hard. You have to talk. You can't live. She died at 73, I think. You can't live in silence like that. You can't do that. She said, you talk, I can't.
So she held on for almost 70 years after.
Had children and grandchildren.
But still couldn't.
And then killed herself.
Couldn't let it go.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
this is why I wanted to archive these, because I feel it's extremely important, not just to tell the story, but to tell the whole story. To tell everybody what really happened.
I want to tell you the truth. You'll never get the whole story.
6 million people died, but they didn't just walk into a room.
They were lives.
Physically,
they were
tortured.
There is a.
And it goes beyond those 6 billion. These families were destroyed.
Forever.
Faith was destroyed.
Forever.
It continues. You said your friend. 70 years later, she killed herself because of what happened then.
That's right.
It's still not over.
That's right. Our generation won't be over. My generation, I'll die with that. I can't. It wasn't just 5 years. It was a complete lifetime. Yeah. It felt like it lasted a lifetime.
But it's important, because if we're not careful, it'll happen again.
It will, by the way.
Yeah. So here we are. This is your story.
Yeah,
I thank you very much for sitting here and.
You're welcome.
And saying what needs to be said.
You're welcome.